Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, my daughter came by and said, you know what? I want to give you a haircut.
Okay. Good evening. We're going to call to order the Encinitas Parks and Rec Commission meeting, February 15th. We're going to start with roll call.
When I say your name, please say present. Chair Warren,
Present.
Vice Chair Lappin, Commissioner Elliott,
Present.
Commissioner Hanson, Commissioner O'Halloran,
Present.
Commissioner Ritter,
Present.
and Commissioner Winters.
Present.
Let the record show all commissioners are present.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Halloran, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Halloran.
You're welcome.
Special presentations and proclamations. Do we have any of those today?
There are none.
Okay. Oral communications.
There are none.
Okay. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Okay. Move on to the January minutes. Have we reviewed those? Okay. Can I entertain a motion to approve?
I move approval.
Okay.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Brad.
Commissioner Hanson?
Okay, we're going to do the technical vote.
If you have the switcher right next to you, you can click agenda/voting, and then it should let you vote from there.
Yeah, I know, I wasn't here.
Let the record show 6 yes, 0 no, and 1 abstain.
Thank you, thank you. Moving on to item 8, action items. Starting with 8A, work plan. Let's see, I've lost, okay. And we're going to start with the 8-1 annual tours. I believe we've completed that. We did a great tour in October. 8-2 city events. I think there's maybe one coming up for this current year. Is that right?
The next special, this is Manager Staten. The next special event coming up is the Egg Hunt, and that will be on April 16th.
Thank you, thank you. 8-3, identify guest speakers for monthly meetings. I know we are working on a Encinitas Trails Coalition representative, and I also did speak with a parks manager from Poway that he was about to retire, and he's been with that city for 35 years, and we were on the discussing the multi-use trails, but he seemed to have a lot of good information, and he might be willing to come speak about what they're doing in Poway, a variety of subjects. So that's going to be next year's work plan, most likely. 8-4, continue support of patrons of Encinitas Parks, PEP, as they continue support of Parks and Rec. I have nothing to report on that. I know last meeting we discussed we did complete the shade structures that PEP helped fund. 8.5, participate in the Parks Recreation Department's implementation of the Parks Master Plan. 1.2a, Trails Master Plan implementation and connectivity. That is Vice Chair Lappin and Commissioner Ritter. And I think at this point, we could probably discuss a little bit the outcomes of these work plans and finalize, as much as we can, the wording for the ad hoc subcommittees for the outcomes, and I think we will approve that at the next March meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Hi.
So, yes, do you have anything to report on the trails?
We do, which I'm happy to start, and then Commissioner Ritter can
Certainly. Go ahead.
supplement. So we actually had a really great call with Manager Norgard. I feel like I live in a time warp. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, roughly.
January 31st.
January 31st, thank you. Oh, I actually wrote the date down. And we were able to go through the trails that were just recently completed, what's coming from a construction perspective, what delays exist alongside those for specifically the Rancho Santa Fe corridor trail. So our master plan agenda here or our work plan agenda had been to review trail connectivity and recommend signage updates. The city did a really great job of initiating some signage updates. I know specifically in Elfin Hain regarding trail use and the right-of-way, as well as reminding people of the ordinances that require that right-of-way. So I know that we've done that. We've also done additional trail signage at some of our trails. And it doesn't sound like there was much need to update signage otherwise. But we had a really great call, more specifically around the opportunities for new trails. And one of the things that Manager Norgard is going to be getting back to us with is a list of what the current map of trails looks like within the community, as well as what the kind of current prioritization of those trails are. One of the things I've started to hearing from people in the community is that the east-west corridors over the 5 are of really high importance to people who want to be able to walk and bike more safely and more freely. And so that's one of the things that we're excited to get a better handle on is what's coming, when will it be ready, and then how does that tie into some of the other planned segments that the city's already working on. And I'm really excited to see that. And I think there's a lot of great stuff I know specifically around what's happening near the San Elejo Lagoon and connectivity there and up through the kind of Cardiff corridor, and as well as what's happening out in Elfin Hain. So I think there's a lot of great potential. But it should be a really great start to kick off the prioritization and trail work within this subcommittee next year. That's really all I have.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lappin. I agree with all that she mentioned there. We did talk a little bit, too, about how Trail 95 has been awarded for construction, and that Trail 82 is in the drawing stage. I had also made a recommendation that I think it would be worthwhile, since there are a lot of new commissioners here now, that it might be a great opportunity for staff to present to us in an upcoming commission meeting a little bit more information on both of those trails, so that the full commission is well aware of what we're looking at, particularly as we consider the multi-million-dollar budget that Trail 82 is. So I would certainly like to see something from staff on that. As an update on the San Elejo-Manchester intersection crosswalk that I've been working on, I did notice on the Mobility and Traffic Safety Commission that it has been pushed up to next month, that they're going to present some ideas from staff as to what to do at that intersection, and then hopefully also connect the crosswalk to the existing northern trail entering into San Elejo Lagoon. The other exciting thing too is Nick Buck is going to start focusing his energies on our new app, which I'm really excited about. So perhaps you might have some type of timeline as to when that might be completed, or what's the goal?
So right now, we are just getting started on building that app. That process takes a few months. What we were hoping to do is have enough of the app developed and enough of the content to launch that when we launch our summer brochure. The brochure that we're getting ready to launch right now is the spring brochure with the summer camps guide. The summer guide goes out sometime in late spring. So we're hoping to have that as a feature in that guide.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, it looks like we made some progress on the trails, and I have identified a couple things already for the next work plan. Commissioner Elliott.
Hi, just a quick question. The discussion about any crossings or over I-5, can you give us a little more detail about that? And like if there's certain areas under consideration?
There are not yet. It's just something that I've heard, I know you mentioned, and I've heard other people mention as well. So it's something that, part of what we requested from Manager Norgard, were you asking me, by the way, or were you asking staff? Okay, I just jumped in assuming it was me, but then I was like, wait a minute. So one of the things that it's hard to tell is we have the map. We have a really great map that shows trails and what's coming and what's already done, but it's not 100% accurate and it's not fully up to date. So what we've asked Manager Norgard to do is provide us the most up-to-date version that we have. And then I think it'll be much easier to identify where those opportunities are lacking. Because I know it shows some things that, again, aren't quite as they are reflected in reality. And you have things like Manchester, which are not currently available, but will soon be accessible in a different way. So I think there's just a lot happening that we want to just get the most accurate version of that map, and then we can better identify. But nothing, that's just something that we want to make sure we're thinking about, not anything that's been actioned by
Okay.
us.
Thanks.
And I'll add to that we did reach out to Caltrans and the San Elejo JPA to get their base maps for the trails that are under development by those agencies. And we've also reached out to Caltrans regarding some of the errors and omissions that we've seen with some of those east-west crossings to see if those are part of their future mobility elements as well.
Thank you. I have a general question about the process of reporting the outcomes for the ad hocs, and maybe Director Carlin, you can help with this. How much detail are we looking for in these, or are we looking to say, for example, yes, we've reviewed trail connectivity and we have recommended signage updates. What do you think the City Council or Parks and Rec is looking for with that?
Sure. So what we definitely want to put down here is some achieved outcomes. Like if you studied a certain item that's related to what's here on your work plan, we just definitely want to say that we studied that, or we're in a process. If we are in a process on one of them, that we met with staff, we talked about updating maps. We're working on that. These are all things that would be outcomes as part of the goals.
Okay.
So it's okay to say we're working on things. It doesn't have to be completely done. You can say this is what we've achieved so far and we're going to continue on with this.
Okay, and should we put that together now, or is this something that the ad hocs can submit to?
You can certainly start that discussion tonight because we'll want to finalize that in the next meeting. So if you want to start that discussion tonight, you can, or if you want to meet as an ad hoc to bring that forward at the next meeting, you can certainly do that as well.
Okay, well, yeah, I think I'll leave that to each ad hoc if you want to initiate a discussion now about the outcomes, or if you want to talk about it and then submit, because the wording can be submitted to Manager Norgard before the meeting. But please feel free if we want to talk about anything, because I know we talked about prioritizing trails and having staff present, but I feel like that's probably more next work plan.
So So this is Director Carlin again, if I may. It's really important for us to make sure that we get the right verbiage in here. So that way, when we bring it forward, it is exactly what you want to present to the city council. So 2 ways, coming up with the verbiage tonight, we can write it up and then present it as part of the staff report next week, and you can say, no, we didn't say that, or yes, that's correct, and then we can tweak it a little bit, or the ad hoc can get together and they can formalize it, send it in, and then we'll bring it back into a public setting, and then you can vote on, yes, those were the actual outcomes.
Okay. Commissioner Ritter.
For our particular ad hoc, I would like to work with Vice Chair Lappin, and we'll come up with some verbiage and submit prior to the meeting.
Okay. That's great. Okay. Thank you. That's what I'm trying to, moving forward, to see how we're going to proceed with that.
And that's prior to our next meeting?
Yes, the March meeting where we finalize the outcomes. Yeah, so for sand volleyball, moving into 1-4B, are we, anything else on trails? Okay. I have just a few bullet points of what we accomplished. Where we surveyed local residents, we provided results to city council, requested and obtained city council approval for the funding for initial studies, and then we updated the sand volleyball community. So that's kind of a rough start, and we can put that together, perfect that, if you will, for next meeting. If anyone has anything else to add for sand volleyball, Commissioner Elliott.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sounds good. I think it's succinct. We might allude to what the next steps might be for next year. Other than that, I think it stands as is, and or Director Carlin and staff can probably improve upon it, give us some guidance.
I can chime in here as well. Just remember that even though we talked about the study for the sport courts, it seems like relatively recently. It was part of the 2-year budget cycle, and it's the second year of the budget cycle that we do that study, so that money becomes available in July. And right now, we're doing a second-year revised budget. Not a lot of stuff will change in that budget cycle because the council already talked about that budget. It'll be the next opportunity to build upon that will come in the next 2-year budget cycle. So this coming fiscal year, which is 22-23, that's where we're going to do the study. And then the next step would be to, if the study comes out that we can change the major use permit for that park, for Encinitas Community Park, then we ask for additional funding to go to the next step, which is likely design. So that's how that would work. And then we would work on that together over the next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Director, are you suggesting that over the next work plan, there might not be a whole lot to do? Well,
there may not be a whole lot of work for the commission to do. It's going to be a lot of staff time to do it, but I think one of the things that you can do to continue this item, if you'd like to keep it on the work plan, is maybe it's something like support with the actual sport court feasibility, or to change the major use permit at Encinitas Community Park, and to continue to attend those meetings when there are public meetings and issue support for that.
Okay, thank you.
How's the determination made on specifically what courts are studied? Sport courts could be lots of different courts?
Sure. So generally speaking, when we do a study, we bring in a consultant who does a process of public outreach. They have public meetings, discussions on what the actual original use was for that park, and if there is a feasibility to change that major use permit. So that'll all be a public process.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on the sand volleyball court item? 3.1.a, continue to develop the vision of an aquatic center.
I'm happy to start on that. Okay. So Commissioner Elliott and I have actually had some really good traction with this subcommittee in the past month. We had a really great call with Councilmember Mosca about just the city's priorities in regards to budgeting and how how we should really, how we would realistically think about an aquatic center as part of the city's planning process. And it was really helpful because from his perspective, it's really not a high priority within the community. So much of our budget is being depleted by street safety and infrastructure projects right now that there isn't really money that the city has that they could devote towards the development and maintenance of an aquatic center. With that said, he used Pacific View as an example of a project that has not necessarily had a ton of internal movement's not quite the right word, but cheerleaders per se, but that the community has been very vocal and very active, and they've really not let the city council let that project fall. So he basically said, this is not something that the council is prioritizing. It's not a high passion project for anybody on the council as that is right now, but that does not mean it's not something we couldn't get behind. We would just need somebody from the community who's incredibly passionate about this, who is going to push it forward. And he was also open to reevaluating the use of that space within the master plan should we not find any traction within the community in a meaningful way, in a realistic way, as it relates to an aquatic center. So it was really helpful just to hear about how city council's thinking about it, what it would take to get something like this off the ground. And subsequent to that meeting, we also then had a really great meeting with John Alderman, who's at the San Dieguito School District. And he is working with the area high schools to fund and complete their own kind of feasibility studies around building aquatic centers within their high schools. So what they've found is that to build 2 pools within the high school district, it'd be about 2 times what they're currently paying just in renting pool space. So he said, for us, it actually does make a lot of sense, especially if we can start incorporating more physical education requirements and other kind of physical components within the day-to-day of the school. So it is something that the district is actively looking to do. They estimate it'll take about $11 million to build their 2 pools. They have identified that they would build one in the south at either Torrey Pines High School or Canyon Crest, and then they want to build one in the north. They don't have room at SDA, so their only options in the north would be either La Costa Canyon, or they have a sports park on Calle Barcelona, where they could potentially put in an aquatic center there. And one of the things he was most interested in talking to us about was, they basically said, we don't need money to build this. We have the money, we can fund the construction. What we really need help with is maintaining it. And he wanted to know if there was any chance that the city would be interested in working with the district and potentially also the city of Carlsbad to help manage and maintain an aquatic center. And I think really what that would come down to on our side is their supplemental use case, because they would still need this aquatic center for their own team sports and their own kind of during the day physical activity requirements and whatnot. So is there a need within our community to have supplemental aquatic space that would justify us taking on the expense to help operate and manage an aquatic center? And I think that's probably the crux of this item is, do we need it and do we want it, and would we have the funding to go about supporting it if we did? And if so, there could be a great partnership there. And if not, it may be time for us to rethink the land allocation. Commissioner Elliott, I think that's the gist of my summary, but.
Yeah, great job. And yeah, we've been very fortunate to have a couple of Zoom meetings on this with Councilman Mosca and with John Alderman, and good perspectives from both of them. Councilman Mosca is very supportive of an aquatic center and believes that there is an impetus and there's still a desire out there, but we're in a position where we've never had what he calls like a champion come forth to really get that project to a tipping point, and we're still there. But then the history that's developing in the background, and we were fortunate enough to get a copy of the most recent feasibility study, and I've been plowing through that, and there's a lot of work being done right now to figure out how and where to place pools within the area. And for the north area of the pool district, the lead contender right now is at La Costa Canyon High School. Also some consideration for locating one at the San Diego Sports Center. But they've done a lot of work on this. I didn't realize they'd already hired outside assistance on this, and they hired what's it called? Greenplay, I think. Is that it? Yeah, Greenplay, which is the same company that helped us with Olympus Park, right? Sounds familiar to me.
This is Director Carlin. Greenplay was the company that helped us with our Parks Master Plan. And then also helped us
okay,
with
that's
our,
what I'm remembering.
Yep,
Thank
and then our
you.
sustainability study.
Okay, so that's even better because they've got a direct link and they understand the background for from that original survey. So I'm happy to see that, and we were told that is going into phase 2. They've done some more work on it, and they will be issuing an updated report, I believe, in April. I think what we're looking at is about $11 million per pool, not for the two of them, but
Oh, I thought it was total.
I think it's per
Per?
pool. Yeah, if you check the report, I think that's how I read it anyway. I think it's, it's a few million we don't have either way. So that's it's a big bogey. And I think what we can do going forward is just to remain in that discussion and try to be aware of where they are in the process, because it has strong implications for what we might be able to do either in partnership with them to achieve the objectives of the master plan and or be changing the master plan for the Encinitas Community Park and repurpose it for other things if indeed that doesn't turn out to be a site for the aquatic center. One quick question, you guys probably can tell us, do we have about an acre there at the park designated for that? Do you happen to know?
This is just a visual on my part, but I think it's a little over an acre.
Okay, because that's basically what they were looking at, is about
Need
a
about an acre.
37-meter pool, and it needed about an acre footprint. So there's obviously, we've got some dirt there, but so there's reason to continue a discourse. There's possibility of a partnership, but there's also a possibility of achieving the objectives to serve the community and get access to lanes and diving and practice and recreation in conjunction with the school district if one of those pools were to be built, let's say, at either LCC or the San Diego Sports Complex. So I think that's where we are. I think we need to continue that discussion and at least be a part of that as good stewards of our space at Encinitas Community Park and just stay in that discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner Elliott and Vice Chair Lappin. Yeah, it sounds like you guys are maintaining a very strong partnership, at least symbolic partnership with the school district for the future, and connecting with the city council, which is also keeping that on their radar. So I know it's a little difficult without the champion, as you say, but I think that's very successful. I mean, getting all that research, and whether we end up partnering with the school district or just supporting what they do if they build those pools. I didn't know they were considering that San Dieguito sports. Have you ever? That's a big space. I think that would be. Yeah, I know they use it for soccer. Yes, Commissioner Winters.
So are you done with the report on that ad hoc? Because I have a couple of questions about if it's okay. Yeah, so I guess when I'm looking at the, what the ad hoc was designed to explore, and I feel like there's been some conclusions kind of drawn from this discussion that you've had with both other city council members and other, interested parties. And to me, why are we, it doesn't seem that without the funding and without the champions, not just one person, but it would be hundreds of people, if not, thousands of people for a project of this scope. Are you not comfortable saying that maybe the aquatic center, you've done your review and it doesn't appear that it should be prioritized? I'm just kind of wondering, there's one thing kind of staying involved in the conversation. There's another sort of evaluating whether this should be prioritized or not. And I'm kind of wondering if you've come to the conclusion yet that it should still be prioritized, should be less prioritized, because I'm not hearing that that the community is demanding this, as at least anecdotally, it seems like the community was very involved when we asked them for input about tennis and pickleball, and they were very involved when we asked them for input about sand volleyball, and they've been very involved, again, anecdotally about Pacific View. I'm just not hearing this groundswell of demand for it, so I'm just wondering, as we evaluate, or as you guys evaluate kind of the conclusion of this, is it that potentially this aquatic center should be not prioritized? So
I can start trying to answer that. I agree with your kind of observation, and I think that was what was most beneficial for me in talking with Councilman Mosca was, it's not that the city would not take this on, it's just that there's nobody who's pushing this forward, and it's a big financial undertaking. And even if the school were to say, we'll pay everything to build the facility on your land, we'll do it. Just to manage the pool, I think they said it's about $400,000 a year, $400,000 a year just to operate and manage, and it's a cost that very few municipalities can make back. So unless there was a really strong and vocal contingent of people showing up week after week saying, this matters, we care, it's worth our community money to be spent on this, I don't know that I personally am convinced that this is something that our community should be investing time and money into doing. I think it's worth exploring, and we shared with John Alderman that what Councilman Mosca shared with us, which is, I mean, we have land designated, but it doesn't sound like they need land. What they really need is operating money, and I just don't see from our community that that's something that people feel strongly about. And maybe what we should do is give the community a chance to chime in on that. I'm not sure how that works. I also was not here when the master plan was done. So if somebody just said to me, would you like a pool in your backyard? I'd say, sure, I'd love a pool. And they're like, well, it costs $3 million. And I'm like, well, actually, never mind. I'll go to the Y. So I don't know how it was done and how the survey was completed to where that was an option that people were responding to. So I can't really speak to how it got here per se, but I am personally questioning whether it's something we should be devoting time and money to after, what year is it, 6 years on the master plan without a champion coming forward yet that I'm aware of.
yeah, just to follow up, so I appreciate your comments on that, and that's kind of what I'm concurring with as well. And it sounds like there's been a little discussion about allocation of land use and allocation of land use at at ECP. And I kind of would like to, and maybe this isn't the right moment to do it, so I apologize if I'm out of order, but I'd kind of like to have that discussion at some point of perhaps what is the proper land use for ECP now that we're 6 or 7 years into it? I know at one point, Director Carlin, I believe he said that these are evaluated every 10 years or so, I believe, perhaps. But maybe it could be evaluated as a work plan item next year in its 7th year because things have changed in our community. So that's all. I just kind of wanted to, it feels like our community maybe at this point in time is demanding something differently. Perhaps that's saying volleyball courts, perhaps that's more pickleball courts, perhaps that's a sports court, I don't know. I think we kind of have an idea, but I just don't hear it being the aquatic center. And that's just, my interpretation of what we're learning here today, so.
Yes, Commissioner Ritter.
I also just feel that if the school is this deep into researching and have the money and they're going to build the pools, great. They'll build the pools and we'll still have the benefit of having access perhaps. So I kind of feel like it's fantastic in the sense that it sounds like there's a possibility of getting 2 pools in close proximity to Encinitas, or perhaps even one in Encinitas, without having to go through the expense of actually building and maintaining it.
Thank you. And Commissioner O'Halloran, did you have something?
Just one point I hope maybe that we can agree on is that in the study that we're going to do for courts at ECP, that we would include that piece of land as part of that study as a viable place to put courts.
We would have to look a little bit more into that. I know that the piece of land that's currently would be looked at is the teen center. I'd need to talk a little bit more with our planning department about how that process works. So hopefully we can bring some more information back to the commission as we enter that process, because we have not yet started meeting on that topic, and I am not fully aware of how that process will work yet, but we have that on our agenda for this spring to start that conversation so that we're ready to roll in the fall.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, Commissioner Winters, I think your timing is perfect and you're the opposite of out of order on this. I feel that, the work plan for us can move quickly and it could not move quickly. And I think there could be an item placed on the work plan that says something like explore viability of aquatic center, possibly working with the school district, and that could be very similar to what we just went through. Or it could be, form a relationship, work strongly with the school district, and, we're going to decide that next month. But I just think getting us clearly, we're all sort of on the same page here, and we're wondering, okay, what exactly should be our focus? So I just wanted to thank you for bringing that up. But I do think getting all the information from the school district is very helpful, and that could be a solution if they do build 2 pools.
Clarification.
Yes.
Yeah, just a quick clarification. Under the San Diego Union High School District study, the 2 pools that they're looking at, like the one in the south would probably be located at Torrey Pines or Canyon Crest, so not up in our area, just to be clear on that.
Okay. Thank you. Yep. Commissioner Hanson.
The pools we're talking about, to me, are something different from the pools that are on this work plan. Because if they're in the school district, it's a different use. Whereas if we're building a aquatic center, it's for all the kids to go to on Saturdays. Just something different from something at a school.
Mm-hmm.
I think the district was, part of what they're hoping that the city will say is, oh, you're going to build a 14-lane swimming pool? Well, we'll chip in some money and we'll do a shallow end and a splash pad and a water slide and diving facility because that's what our community wants, but we can go in on it together. So I think they're more saying, we know what we need. We're open to incorporating what you need if you guys want to come in and help operate the facility with us. But we know what we need and we know what we're going to build. And one of the things that did come up at the end of our conversation, which I meant to highlight earlier, was if they were to move forward with building at the sports complex, right on the brink of Carlsbad and Encinitas, he did say, you know, maybe Encinitas and Carlsbad would be willing to come in together. We'd give priority use to the schools and then our community members of kind of time in the pool or renting the facilities, et cetera, and we could all manage it together. Because their biggest thing, like I said, is the management. Like, for them to do swim team, they don't need lifeguards. But if we as a community wanted to open it for open swim, you need to pay for lifeguards. They, as a sports facility, don't need to have a full kind of bathroom, locker room. They've already got that at the schools. But if we as a community come in, we would probably need some degree of locker rooms and changing facilities. So there's a lot of use cases that would shift the operating and the physical structure development if the community were to come in. And that's, again, where, I mean, I've only been on this commission for 2 years, and a big portion of that was COVID, and we were from Zoom, but I've not once heard somebody from the community come to one of these meetings and say, this matters to me, and I want it to matter to you, and I think it's worth our dollars to make it happen. But I've been to city council meetings. I've heard people come and be passionate about the things they really care about, and encourage us to spend money. So knowing how hard it is to keep and train staff and to accrue the type of budget you would need to manage a facility like this, again, I do not personally feel that this is something that we are in a position to invest in as a community. Though, again, maybe we need to open it up and hear from the community, but it is hard at this stage with what we've had over the past 2 years to sit here with conviction and say, I think it's worth $500,000 a year to manage a pool, in whatever else it would cost to develop it. So, for what that's worth.
And I think it's also important to take into consideration the environment of the last 2 years. We've had, we've had municipal pools throughout the state closing down because of COVID. So it hasn't been the most positive environment for a while. But I do think going forward, yeah, it could be a hybrid concept. It could be totally done by the schools. It seems unlikely that it would be a municipal pool that services both the needs of the high school and the community, which is the case in many communities. But at any level, we're not really seeing that much enthusiasm come forward for something like that.
And if I remember some of the history on it from what I've heard from others, the passion for the pool came from parents who wanted their kids to swim competitively. It wasn't so much an alternative to going to the beach. It was really more about a shortage of pools in the local area where it was difficult for their kids to actually train for competition. And if we have the addition of these school pools, then it's obviously going to increase that availability dramatically.
That's totally correct. The schools and the club teams, it's the number of lanes that they have to rent every month, and they're renting lanes, from Carlsbad down to Torrey Pines and below. So, and diving platforms and dive times. So, yeah, it's all that.
Yeah, I've heard that it's very cyclical, like sand volleyball. The parents, they want to get their kids and they're gung-ho, and then their kids get older and it subsides and then it comes back. So it's just got to jump on that champion. Got to find that champion. Well, good. Thank you. I will move on to the next, number 6, research best practices and policies in regard to multi-use trail sharing. In a nutshell, for the year, we've gathered feedback. We've connected with Traffic and Public Safety Commission. We've attended meetings like the Solana Beach, Joint Solana Beach Encinitas safety meeting. We did offer some support with the San Diego Bike Coalition and with their safety video. And then the last item we just worked on was reaching out to surrounding areas and cities that are similar to Encinitas. And I can talk a little bit about the areas I looked into. We discussed about a few weeks ago some of the cities, and we sort of split up different regions. The most interesting for me was Poway, and I spoke with Bob Han, the City of Poway Parks and Trails Manager. He's the one who might be a potential guest speaker. And he said they have more trouble with extreme mountain bikers, kind of like the Mountain Dew commercial types, over this area called, close to bordering to this Big Sky Ecological Reserve. But what they did, they actually with e-bikes, they banned e-bikes, and then they suffered a lot of pushback from their residents, and then they ended up following what the San Diego County does, and allowing Class 1 and 2, which is basically what Encinitas does by default, because our municipal code isn't specific, so we're going with what the state has declared as being bicycles, which is Class 1 and Class 2. And they also have a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit, and they dropped that to 10 if people are nearby. I kind of like that idea. And they have 2 park rangers. So Bob was telling me, we have a real hard time enforcing with only 2 park rangers. And I said, well, that's 2 more than we have. And he was just like, as I mentioned, he was super forthcoming and had a lot of good information. But moving to Del Mar, I spoke to Mark Rathsam, Deputy Chief of Community Services, and his main dealings with e-bikes is on the beaches, and they have just sort of a guideline where if the e-bikers are not pedaling, then they're told to slow down. And they have trails, but they don't have a lot of horse users within their area, so it's mainly the beach issue. With San Marcos, they're about to propose e-bike use for most of their trail system for Class 1 and Class 2, with the exception of Walnut Grove Park, where it's a very heavy equestrian area. So they're allowing e-bikes, but if there's too many horses, basically they're saying no e-bikes. And they have park rangers too, so they have a bigger staff. And they know it's a hot topic, and I attended a Trails Advisory Committee meeting last year for them, and so they're waiting for an in-person city council meeting for their commission to bring this to their city council so they could have public input, because they don't want to do it via a Zoom city council meeting. So that could happen within the next 2 months that they allow e-bikes. And those are the areas. I don't know if the other commissioners wanted to discuss any areas they looked into.
I'm happy to speak briefly. Again, the goal for this subcommittee was recommending best practices for multi-use trail sharing. And so I looked at Escondido, and Escondido's trails are all kind of grouped by location. So kind of like we have Manchester Preserve and we have Encinitas Ranch, and you can cater your rules based upon the usage at those parks. And one of the things that stuck out at me most was the biggest issues that they reported having were with people, both hikers and bikers, going off trail, and the damage that does to the ecosystem when people do that. So they've actually introduced an ordinance to make that a misdemeanor, and they have enabled their rangers to write tickets and citations for people who are found doing that. And I feel like I keep coming back last year, the same thing, that a lot of the issues we have is just general trail etiquette. It's not necessarily one specific group of people, but people who don't seem to know the rules of the trail and the detriment that breaking those rules can have on the ecosystem around them. So I think one of the best things we can do is just make sure that we're staying on top of what the rules for trail usage at each location are. And it's hard because we don't really have any enforcement vehicle by which we can manage that. So you have to just hope people will do the right thing, but just make it as clear as possible what that actually is in each unique use case.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lappin. Commissioner Winters.
Yes, thank you. So I was able to have some email correspondence with Melanie Fallon. Melanie is on the Elfin Forest and Harmony Grove Town Council, and also the chair of the Trails Committee for Elfin Forest. And they've decided, due to their specific use case, which is mostly horse riding and equestrian, that they've banned the use of e-bikes on all of their trails. So not, allowing it at all. Similarly, she expressed via email that they also have enforcement issues. So kind of similarly, just hoping that people are reading the signs and recognizing and following the rules. Also of interest, there's another area within Elfin Forest called the Elfin Forest Recreational Reserve, which I believe is managed by the Livenheim Municipal Water District. And it's a big area. It's 800 acres and 11 miles of trails. And they, too, very clearly ban e-bikes. So just another data point of a neighboring community where they're taking a little bit of a different stance, perhaps, but they're doing their best to not have e-bikes on their trails. And that's, again, Elfin Forest.
Thank you, Commissioner Winters. Yeah, and the Center for Natural Land Use Management, they do that as well. They just outlaw e-bikes, and Manchester Preserve outlaws bikes completely. Although there's been reports of bikes on those trails. I think we've made a lot of progress. We've really touched and reached out to lots of groups, and I don't think we're going to recommend any changes to what's allowed as far as e-bikes. Do we have anything else on the multi-use trails? Commissioner Ritter?
I would just ask staff, with regards to this particular issue, do we get a lot of complaints from residents regarding e-bikes or bikes on any of our trails?
Not necessarily e-bikes per se, just trail etiquette is a big thing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an e-bike. Sometimes it's just bicyclists who aren't watching out for pedestrians. So and it's occasional. We don't get an influx of it, but we do get them occasionally.
Thank you. Yeah, and every call I had, everyone says we're having tons of discussion, and generally agree that the bigger safety issues are on the roads rather than on the trails. But yeah, and the one thing I can add, I've heard just that the Encinitas Ranch is where there's not necessarily e-bikes, but some bikers going too fast on those trails by the golf course. Okay, item 7, review tennis court and pickleball court use in city parks. So I feel pretty good about this one, right? I think my notes here, we discussed issues with residents, posted requests for feedback, held a Zoom feedback session, made recommendations to Parks and Rec staff, and they put a new court sharing policy in place at Cottonwood Creek. And then we also requested Parks and Rec staff obtain estimates for making Moonlight Beach courts permanent dedicated pickleball courts. So I was just curious about that last part, if that, I think you said we're looking at the resurface for Moonlight?
Yes, so any of that would be future budgeting. That would be a future budgeting item because we would have to assess the condition of the court first.
Okay.
Well, on that particular point, so the assessment of the court needs to go through a budget process?
Correct. So it costs a certain amount of money. We're still trying to determine what that is, but it does cost money to do an assessment of that court. Remember, that court is kind of in a wetland area, so there's some definite likely foundational issues. When Annette was here, we talked about resurfacing that court, but the long and short of it is resurfacing the court is only going to fix it temporarily. It's going to be something that's going to have to be done annually or every other year in order to keep it in good condition.
Well, I know another option we had asked to be estimated somehow was removing the tennis nets, putting in stronger, more permanent pickleball nets. And I'm not sure if any of those options also require the court to be resurfaced. I guess my understanding is the court's currently in use.
The courts are currently in use, and we do have pickleball nets there available for our players.
Right. And those nets need to be taken up and down each time they're used.
That is correct.
Okay. And I know the pickleball community asked us specifically if they could have different nets potentially, and potentially have the court dedicated to pickleball so the nets weren't coming up and down, and it was a better environment for them. And I know that I've asked to have estimates of different nets and that put together for us. And I'm not sure, do we have to go through a budget process to get those estimates? And I'll say I'm asking for some of those estimates because I believe there may be appetite in the community to go ahead and pay for some of those things if the estimates are reasonable to have those things done.
Sure. So I can check back in with staff. When Annette was here, we did discuss the feasibility and the liability that comes into play with that, because we're not yet ready to make that specific to pickleball. The tennis community is not in support of that. I've talked to several of the tennis players. They are not in support of that being only a pickleball court. And right now, the direction that we got from City Council is to make courts multi-use. So that's where we're at right now. We can look at different nets, but the more permanent nets are definitely a liability because they require a certain level of install and take up when they're putting them down and removing them. Something more permanent would be great, but then that takes away the tennis court use at that facility.
Thank you. It's news to me to hear that you have received additional feedback from the tennis community about the dedication of that court. Was that feedback given within the context of dedicating the Glen Park court to tennis and the Moonlight Park court to pickleball? Was that part of that conversation?
I don't recall talking about dedicating Cottonwood Creek specifically to tennis. We have a shared use out there.
Yeah,
The
not
Glen
par-
Park.
The Glen Park.
Yeah, I don't know that we talked about that.
Because that was specifically part of our recommendation to consider that. And if the community gave feedback that they didn't want Cottonwood, did they know that Glen Park was I'm sorry, not Cottonwood, but Moonlight to be dedicated? That was part of the idea, to dedicate one of those courts to tennis, one to pickleball, to maximize the usage.
Sure. And I think that we need to do a little bit more work on that,
Okay,
to be quite honest.
thank you.
Thanks for the follow-up, Commissioner O'Halloran, on that, the Moonlight. Just one question I'm scared to ask, but has there been more feedback regarding the court sharing at Cottonwood?
I want you to knock on wood. It's still
Again.
going well.
Okay. Okay.
I just wanted to chime in and just say that I think that the commission did a tremendous amount of work on that. That was probably the one item on the list that probably had the most public outreach, the most input from the community, and it resulted in a budget item. That's pretty impressive, so to all take place in 1 year. And I feel right now that, yes, there's still a need for courts in the community, but the pickleball and tennis community are understanding the changes that we made, and they are working together harmoniously right now.
They're playing better together.
They are.
Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, yes. Okay, compost options in city parks and facilities. Vice Chair Lappin and Commissioner Ritter.
Well, I had very grand plans here that did not come to fruition. The city just doesn't have the bandwidth or the funding to take on something like this, it sounds like. And unfortunately, being that this is a state bill that's mandating the rollout of organic waste diversion, there's a set timeline and process by which the city has to comply with residential, multifamily, commercial, et cetera. And so we're just not there where the city is able to take on, even if we were to look into doing a private partnership with somebody like Coastal Roots or Solana Center. It sounds like they just can't make anything happen from the city end right now. So I hope in the future this is something that we can make happen, but I can respect the fact that this is not that time for a number of reasons. So it is an unfortunate update, but that is the update I have.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I remember that an email from, was it from Ashley, kind of saying that they don't have the funding. But I am, I want to say good job on researching that and finding out. And I think it has some visibility because it's on the work plan and it's being discussed every month. So that's, something that could improve next year. I don't know if you're going to continue pushing that or not, but there's some progress, yeah. Item 9, fitness trail court feasibility. Commissioner Ritter and Winters.
For on this particular work plan item, we've already have taken care of the first half with regards to looking to see if the recreational trails master plan would need to be amended, which it does not. So now what we've done is Commissioner Winters and I created an evaluation criteria to look at all of the parks in our system. And we were looking at factors such as can the park size accommodate a fitness amenity? Are there complementary sport amenities on site? Are there playground equipment nearby? Is there water or restrooms on site? Whether open space is used for special events, whether clearing, grading would be required to install a fitness amenity. We looked at the current estimated park utilization and also the anticipated outdoor fitness amenity utilization as well. We also looked at whether the location provides regular visibility and exposure. With regards to access, we looked at pedestrian and bike accessibility using existing trails, sidewalks, and lanes. We looked at parking availability as well as handicap parking availability. I went to every park in Encinitas, and it was a great education because not only was it great for this particular work plan item, but it also gave me a great background to better understand what assets we have in our park system. So it was very helpful in that respect. I would say that when I went around and looked at these parks, that it was a personal assessment. So some of the information is concrete, whether there's a water fountain or a restroom there, but some of it can be very subjective with regards to looking at utilization and then trying to figure out, well, what do I think the utilization of a fitness amenity might be there? In addition to just looking at the possibility of adding a fitness court, which would be a larger footprint amenity, we were also looking at the opportunity of adding what I would call a fitness cluster, which would be a smaller footprint that might have 3 or 4 equipment options, perhaps a pull and push exercise with an ab bench, so like pull-ups, maybe push-up bars, an ab bench. And we looked at the possibility of adding something small like that in some parks that wouldn't be able to accommodate a larger fitness court. We ranked them according to what we thought were strong candidates, likely candidates, or a candidate for a small fitness cluster, or finally an unlikely candidate for any fitness amenity. So we've worked on kind of going through that process, and now we're working with staff to kind of review some of our preliminary conclusions. They have a lot more background with regards to the parks and their utilization. There are some parks that might be in restricted areas with regards to watersheds or things that I would not be aware of, that having their expertise will kind of help us finalize what might be good potential options. So, so at this point, Commissioner Winters and I feel like we have kind of completed the last half of that work plan item, which is to explore other potential locations. So then next year, or for the next work plan, then we're going to work on what our next steps are and work with staff as well to kind of create a vision for the next year.
Okay, thank you. Great work. I have just one question. Did you say you ranked the locations?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and is that in a report, or is that something we?
Before we release anything like that, we really wanted to have staff to provide their input.
Okay.
Because I feel like a lot of the information can be a little bit subjective, and I think it would be preliminary to release the information until more information is looked at and made sure that it was accurate.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I think even when staff does look at it, I'd still be understood that it's just the commission's just exploring, as it's worded. So I don't think it would be too concrete. Vice Chair Lappin, did you have something?
Are you still waiting to hear back from NCTD about the rail trail location?
My understanding from speaking with staff is that NCTD would be open to the possibility of having a fitness amenity along there. We first identified an area in Cardiff that we think would be ideal. We're also considering the possibility of maybe another amenity in a future CRT through Leucadia. It's a bit narrower with regards to the land that would be available to put in some type of amenity, but again, we could adjust the amenity to kind of fit the space, perhaps, of what would be available. There's also a really nice park there at Leucadia Oaks that might be ideal for a small fitness cluster. There's a lot of there's a skate park, there's basketball courts, there's sand volleyball. So there are a lot of complementary amenities there already, and it's also a very high usage park.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Elliott.
Yeah, I love the idea of clusters. I think that is just, that just opens up all sorts of possibilities. And my first thought is like some of the more active trails in addition to the rail trail, some of the more popular trails. And I'm wondering, with the concept of clusters, I know that the staff did an excellent job coming up with grant money when we were looking at equipment like that for the senior center, for example. Would that be a good approach to help with some of that funding?
This is Director Carlin. Grant funding is always a good resource, and we do have different opportunities for grant funding, a lot of times through the county or the state or other private organizations. So if that's something that we want to explore a little bit more, we can certainly research grant funding. Grant funding on healthy communities is generally pretty popular and usually is a good resource for us.
Okay, thank you. Item 10 and 11, or 8, 10, 8, 11 for June 2022. Moving to 9A, Park Operations Report.
Chair Warren, before we
Yes.
go into that report, could I just speak one more item on the work plan?
Yes.
So right now, we're in February. March is when we finalize that work plan. So again, to the ad hocs, if any of the information in the outcomes needs updating, if you could get that to us, that way we can print it in this work plan. and then bring it forward to the commission. That way we can get an approval for this work plan on the next meeting. And then what we will be doing for those new commissioners that haven't been part of this process before, well, you all have because you've been on it for a year. We will be bringing, I'll just remind you, we'll be bringing a blank worksheet that we start a whole new work plan on. And there's some items on here that I could see moving forward, or we recondition it to go on to the next step. But please think about new work plan items over the next month that you would like to see. But again, I always encourage the commission to come up with achievable goals. I think if you've listened to some of the council meetings, we've heard we don't have a gigantic bucket of money, right? We do have some competing priorities right now, like trails that are already being designed that we need to still fund. We have some other priorities like pickleball and tennis courts and other sport courts like sand volleyball. We have a lot of competing priorities. So being thoughtful about that, and if you do have a grand idea, just know that it may be a process to get to it. But also, talking to some of your community members and finding out what they want to see is really important over the next month or two to really not just bring forward a project idea because we think it's a great idea, but is it something that the community would support?
Thank you, Director Carlin. And I'll just add that we've discussed some of the outcomes here today, and I think the more valuable time, or the most valuable thing we can do is discuss the work plan for next year. So I encourage the ad hocs to try and nail down your outcomes, email them to staff, and ideally in our next meeting, we can just fine tune that a little bit and spend the majority of the meeting. And I think this year, or the beginning, it took a couple meetings to work out that work plan, which is fine, but I think it's great to think about what we want to try to accomplish this next year. Okay, Park Operations Report, Manager Norgard.
Good evening. This is Manager Norgard. I have a couple updates for you this evening. On February 3rd, Parks completed the installation of approximately 100 native plants along the Coastal Rail Trail south of Montgomery Avenue. This is an area that was previously disturbed and sparsely vegetated with weeds and bare soil. Contractors first removed the invasive weeds by hand and planted native species, including California brittlebrush, California buckwheat, and California sagebrush, and we installed mulch to retain moisture and prevent the resurgence of invasive weeds. And as we move through the rest of the winter and spring, we have a couple more sites that we're going to continue to infill with native plants along the rail trail. On Monday, February 7th, the fire department responded to a brush fire north of Encinitas Boulevard, west of I-5, adjacent to Cottonwood Creek Park. Units quickly extinguished the fire and stopped the progress at approximately a quarter of an acre. 2 engines stayed at the site overnight, essentially in the park, to ensure that there were no flare-ups. The fire originated on Caltrans property and migrated onto park property. And subsequently on Friday, the 11th, Caltrans, Sheriff, and other partners conducted a cleanup of the area on Caltrans property and removed several tons of debris and trash from that area. The city, fire, parks, Caltrans continue to have coordination dialogue regularly to work toward keeping this area clear and manage the risk of fire. And looking forward, Infrastructure and Sustainability Department will hold a pre-construction kickoff meeting with the contractor that was selected for Trail 95. That meeting will be on February 25th, and we anticipate issuing the notice to proceed with construction within approximately 2 weeks of that meeting. That concludes my updates.
Okay, good news on the trail. 9B, Recreation Services Report, Manager Tracy Staten. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Manager Staten. The Community and Senior Center had been closed due to the rise in Omicron COVID-19 cases. However, it was reopened yesterday with masks required for all guests, and masks continued to today. However, tomorrow the mask mandate changes and masks will be required for non-vaccinated guests and highly encouraged for those that are vaccinated. In recognition of Love Your Heart Week, on February 17th, AMR is conducting free blood pressure screening from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Encinitas Community and Senior Center. Other exciting news, the rec guide will be coming out shortly. This will be for spring programs and for summer camps. They should hit homes on the 5th of March, and registration will open for those programs on the 7th of March. Lots of exciting news and staffing updates. We have the Senior Services Recreation Supervisor position. First round interviews for that was yesterday, and second round interviews will be this coming Thursday, the 17th. The other Recreation Supervisor position that we currently have vacant will focus on programming and camps. And the first round of those interviews will be conducted next week, Tuesday, the 22nd, and second rounds will be on Tuesday, the 1st of March. So very much looking forward to getting those positions filled and some excellent candidates brought on board to this team. In addition, the extended part-time positions are currently open, and the recruitment for those closes on the 27th of this month. We have 3 of those positions currently open and available for people to apply. One is a customer service coordinator, one is a senior services coordinator, and one is an event and rental coordinator. And we're really hoping that those positions will help with recruitment and retainment of staff in order to assist with all of the amazing programming we have at the community center and senior center. And probably the most exciting update today is that we were notified today by the California Park and Rec Society that the city of Encinitas was awarded 2 awards. The 2021 California Park and Rec Society for Excellence in Design Park Planning will be awarded at the state conference for Olympus Park.
All right.
Yay! And we are also awarded the 2021 California Park and Recreation for Excellence in Design, Facility Design for the Encinitas Senior Center Patio Project. Yay! And both
that's
of those
great.
will be officially announced and awarded in front of the entire state of California Park and Rec professionals at the conference being held March 8th through 11th in Sacramento. So at that point, we'll be receiving a plaque and recognition, and press releases will be available, and we'll be able to officially send that information out. So go
Wow,
us.
that is
Congratulations.
really cool. Yeah, great job. And you're gonna go, I assume? Are you gonna go? Who's gonna go up to?
Yes, I will be heading up to Sacramento for the conference, as will 2 other members of my team.
Okay, congratulations. Just one question about your part-time positions. I know you got them extended, or you got approval to extend the hours. I think, have you gotten more applicants when you did that, or?
At this point, I don't know what the applicant pool looks like. I'll have to check with HR and see to date where we are with the number of applicants for each of the positions. But I have heard some great buzz about that from current staff, and then other people from outside the city who have shown interest and contacted me about those. So hopeful.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was just curious if that made a difference. Okay. Do we have any commission member initiated?
I have 2 questions
Yes.
relating to that.
Commissioner Ritter.
First of all, congratulations again. I'm very excited to hear about that, and I know that there's been lots of kudos about the senior center with the patio and the fitness equipment that went in there too. My first question, I was curious with regards to the requirement that that people wear masks if they have not been vaccinated. Are you doing vaccination checks for entry into, or are you just taking their word?
No, we won't be conducting. It'll be an on your honor system as it has been previously.
Thank you. And then the second question I had, obviously the department has endured a lot of hardship with regards to the fact that we've had so many open positions, and you guys have done a fantastic job of managing through that during this time. I was curious, though, what happens to the thousands of dollars that haven't been spent on payroll and benefits that would have been spent or have been budgeted for those positions?
So that would go back to the general fund for future allocations.
Darn. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ritter. Do we have any commission member initiated agenda items or future agenda items added by commission members?
Chair Warren,
Yes.
I do have a couple things as a part of the director's report, if that's okay.
Oh, did I
You're okay.
skip over? Sorry, please.
That's okay.
Director Carlin.
I did want to chime in on the EPT positions. So EPT stands for extended part-time. The one thing I do want to stress for those that might be interested in these positions is they do have prorated benefits associated with them as well. So right now, our part-time staff only get sick time, but these do have some additional benefits like health insurance and some vacation time and such. So if there's people out there that are looking for part-time jobs, these are great opportunities, especially for people who are just starting out their career in recreation. So I just wanted to put that out there. And Tracy did a fantastic job of working with HR to get those new position descriptions in and get those out. In addition, I just wanted to also just say congratulations to Tracy and her team for putting in the applications for these awards. Whenever we're submitting applications for any type of awards or recognition, it's always extra work. It's a lot of extra work. And Tracy and her team did it during a time where they were trying to keep the community and senior center afloat. So I applaud her for all of her efforts in that, and I appreciate her time. And then I also did forward on the good news to Annette out in Tennessee because she was instrumental in those projects as well. So, so I did reach out to her. In addition to that, we have a Pacific View meeting tomorrow at 3 p.m. It's a special meeting to discuss the zoning of that property and potentially have a discussion about future uses. And again, that is happening at 3 p.m. tomorrow. Also wanted to let you know about a couple of really exciting public art projects that are going to be occurring over the next few months. As you may know, we did do the Santa Fe project where we had the mosaics that were installed. We are nearing the point where we are going to be starting to install the mosaic over at Encinitas Boulevard. That will happen sometime in late spring. In addition to that, we're working on an RFQ, request for qualifications for an artist to work with Paul Ecke's students to develop the artwork for the El Portal undercrossing. So we are working on that, hopefully getting that RFQ out soon. And then the last one that we're working on right now in public art is we are working on the sculpture pedestal project. Some of you may know that we installed 5 pedestals in 2020 in each of the 5 communities. And the intention is that we would have a revolving sculpture on those pedestals. So we're working on the call for artists for that right now as well. In addition to that, not only in recreation, but we've also had some vacancies in parks and in arts. And this morning we did our second round of interviews for our arts assistants. So hopefully we can come to a conclusion on that in the next couple days on who we're going to select for that position. So Colette Murphy, who was previously the arts assistant, was promoted to arts administrator. And so she is selecting her replacement for that position. The other exciting news is that our event permitting has now gone online. Yay, we stepped into this century. So we're very excited about that. Administration did a very good job of reaching out to our major event organizers and taking them through an actual training on how to use that system and make sure that the transition is seamless. We've had several people already submit, so we're doing really well in that. And that's the conclusion of my report.
Thank you, Director Carlin, and I apologize for missing the 9C there. That was more than a few things, so I'm glad we got to that. Commissioner roundtables. Let's start with Commissioner Winters.
I don't have anything to add at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Ritter, we're going to go down the line.
Thank you. I didn't mention it, and I meant to earlier when we were on the fitness trail work plan item, but I would say that I am very excited about working with Manager Norgard. He has been fantastic with regards to giving us some very meaningful, thoughtful suggestions that I think will drive our success. So I just wanted to give a shout out to him. I did have just a couple things that I was just going to kind of bring up briefly as I was kind of touring some of the parks over the last month. And did you happen to get my email with the photos?
I did.
Okay, awesome. go ahead and throw it up, whatever you have, and then I'll just ask the question. I initiated a conversation with regards to this plot of land that it seems that the city and it looks like the Parks Department may actually own and maintain. It's at the end of F Street, and it's like a viewpoint in Encinitas downtown. And so I was just kind of curious, Manager Carlin, whether you might, and this is another view of the same spot, and I think I might have actually caught a photograph of two young people making out at the moment, so I apologize for that. But I was curious, Manager Carlin, if you had any kind of background on this property and what the intended use of it will be?
So we would definitely have to look at this. It is in a coastal zone. It's also on a bluff. So we would definitely have to look at this with our coastal administrator and talk about this parcel of land.
But there hasn't been any thoughts as to
I've not heard anything.
what to do with it. But it is something that is Parks and Rec land?
I would have to look into that as well.
Okay.
to
I just
determine.
noticed the signs seem very
Yep.
Parks and
It likely is. I just have to check into that.
And then also on the next slide, this is the G Street viewpoint, still on the same bluff, just 1 block away. And of course, we have some wonderful parks already at, J, H, and I, that I don't have photos of that offer opportunities to sit and admire the ocean. But, these are $1 million plus parcels of land that are currently vacant. And I was just kind of curious if the city had any long-term goals or plans for this land. This is a display, and there's actually 2 of them. There's one more as well. That's at Sun Vista Park out east, and it was basically an educational tool to talk about fire safety, and it looks kind of like it's gone through a fire. So I was just kind of curious, just to maybe put it on your radar as to whether this is something we might want to look at replacing or updating or pulling out or whatever the staff might think would be best.
I know that part of this was grant funded, so I'll speak with staff and determine what the grant requirements were and what the grant performance period is, and I can bring that information back next month.
Fantastic, thank you. The other thing that I notice a lot, not only in my kind of park tours, but also just going to Cottonwood, is the parking situation is always a challenge there, particularly considering that they hold a lot of special events there. And Manager Norgard and I kind of discussed other available parking lots that visitors could use and still access the park. Of course, there's a large NCTD parking lot that's kind of across the intersection there that technically is for NCTD use, but people obviously park there for other reasons as well, and there doesn't seem to be any parking enforcement really in that area. But we also have a large city lot that's behind the buildings along 101. And I had always thought that lot actually belonged to the building owner, but I understand from speaking with Manager Norgard that it actually is a city lot. So my meaning for bringing this up is perhaps considering some signage as you're exiting Cottonwood, that there is additional city parking lot available for people that want to go to Cottonwood but just can't seem to find the parking. Because I do see a lot of people that just kind of loop through there, and it's like, oh, not lucky today. So, and then of course there's people that will park kind of across the street on the bank there, which is not ideal, but it's another place that people kind of free park. Just regarding a couple ideas that I had as we kind of break and we think about future work plan items. One of the things that I would love to see is a stronger PEP. And I'm just curious whether we might kind of think about if there's anything that we could do as a commission that would help that organization increase its membership and be able to be more involved with our department. I think it's a grand goal, and I think that having them as a fundraising avenue, particularly in these times when budgets are tight, that having them out there in the community advocating for us to raise funds is really beneficial to the department. But I feel like that they obviously could use some support with regards to driving membership or getting involvement. And if there's anything as we brainstorm this next month for the next month's work plan, maybe there's something that we could do as a commission to kind of assist with that. And then my final suggestion, again, for kind of thinking on down the road, is when we're working here on the commission, we come to the commission with our own ideas and our own perspectives, and then we hear staff's. But I feel that it can be a little isolated with regards to maybe not really hearing enough of the voices in the community. So I was also thinking that perhaps another work plan item might be considering having commissioners pick certain groups where the commissioners would go on their own, not necessarily representing the commission, but basically could be the eyes and ears for the commission to kind of understand what's going on and what their viewpoints are, what needs that they have. For an example, I know Chair Warren is involved with the Encinitas Trails Coalition, and his involvement with them adds to the knowledge that we have here. So there are some organizations like Bike Walk Encinitas. Perhaps we could come up with some other ones where, and perhaps you're already members of some organizations that utilize the parks, but it might be an opportunity for us to bring some additional community feedback, because obviously we don't really get them showing up at our commission meetings. So perhaps we really need to go out and reach them and really kind of help drive that feedback so that we can support their needs, and then also be additional eyes and ears for staff as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, sort of reaching out to find out what people think, because like you say, it's when meetings are in real life, we have input, but not nearly as much as we want. Thank you. Commissioner O'Halloran.
I'd just like to recognize Commissioners Ritter and Winters for your work and the detail and the time that you put into the fitness trail initiative and the work you're continuing to do as staff to try and bring that forward. Great work, and thank you.
Thank you.
I also wanted to recognize and thank Commissioners Lappin and Elliott for the great work and the conversations that you've done with the school district regarding the possibilities, the options, the access to what they are doing with the aquatic center, and then bringing that information back to us. It was all new information to me that was even going on, and that that we have an opportunity if there's community interest that really wants to take that up, to go in that direction. Whereas the other side of that is the recognition that we really don't see the community need, or really the tremendous budget funding that would be required to try and do it on our own. So I wanted to thank you for those conversations and bringing that information back to us.
Thanks. Commissioner Hanson. Okay. Commissioner Elliott.
Yeah, I just want to thank Director Alderman for taking the time to enlighten both Courtney and I about the aquatics opportunities out there, what the district is doing and all the research they've done, and also Councilman Mosca for giving us his time, and to thank Commissioner Lappin for her work in pulling that all together and the background work we've done on that. And then also just reflection over the last couple of years and how tough some of this has been on the management and the city staff and Parks and Rec, and just kudos to you guys for persevering, for plowing through and dealing with the difficult issues regarding public health and all the staffing issues that you've had to deal with, particularly in the last few months. So way to go, guys. I hope this is more than just a reprieve. I hope that things get easier going forward.
Thank you. Vice Chair Lappin.
I'm going to start by, Commissioner Ritter, I have thoughts on some of the things you brought up in your slideshow, which I appreciated and loved. So thank you very much for taking the time to put that together. Something I learned when we spoke to Councilman Mosca, which may apply to those vacant lots on the bluff, is that Pacific View is an example. Just to make that physical structure safe enough for anyone to be physically on that property, I think he said would be between $10 and $11 million. Well, earmuffs if you don't want to hear that part, but and a lot of it has to do with the zoning that applies to that land. So I would be very curious, because I think that's a really good call out, that we have these signs but no benches, nothing else really there. What the zoning implications are for that land, and not that we have the budget to necessarily develop them in any safe or meaningful way, but I do think it's interesting that if we have public land, for us as a commission to be across what you can legally and safely do with it. And that was not something that was even on my radar prior to our conversation with Councilman Mosca. So I think it's a really good call out, and there's a lot clearly that we still have to learn about how these lands and spaces are structured for the usability. I also think it's really interesting what you brought up about people not coming to these meetings, because that was something that we brought up with John Alderman as well, that he didn't even know this commission existed, or that we met regularly to discuss these things, and that there was an opportunity for the community to come. And I wonder, what the line is between us going out and finding it and us encouraging people to come here and share. And I do think that's a really great observation on your part, that there's more we could be doing. And I hope that we explore that more as a commission, because I would love to have people standing here and telling us what they think and what they want and what they could use. But it's hard to force people to care. And I think that's something that I know I personally struggle with. So it would be nice to see if, as a commission, there are ways that we can bridge that, because people do genuinely care. And I don't know why they don't come here. And I'm sure everyone has thoughts on that, but just a note. And I don't think I have anything additional to add on my own. But again, I appreciate everybody who takes the time out of their busy lives to volunteer their time and their passion and their community involvement to represent our community in this way. It's hard, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of perseverance and a lot of pushing. And I thank staff for guiding us. You've been really tremendous to work with, and it's been a really tough, I don't even know anymore, like 500 years it feels like. So thank you. It's been really nice to have your support, and I sincerely hope that we keep pushing, because I know change takes time, and a lot more in the public sector than what I think many of us are used to in our private lives. But I applaud that each of us shows up and continues pushing, because it does pay off, and we're seeing it, just not as fast as I think many of us would like. So thank you all for being here, because It's an effort.
Thank you. Yes, many commissioners have said what I wanted to say, of course, but Winters and Commissioner Ritter, great work on the trail sports court, and the sort of last mile work on the aquatic center. It sounds like there's solid framework for a partnership there with the aquatic center, so that's wonderful. Commissioner Ritter, those viewpoints, I heard a rumor that John Denver paid for those. Has anyone else heard anything like that?
I hope that's true.
A long time ago, former Commissioner Doug Long would know. But I was just, on the subject of it's been a strange year. I mean, on top of the pandemic, I look around and there's only 2 other people that were here when I started. So it's incredible turnover, and I think we've done a pretty magnificent job pushing through and making progress. And our newest member is analyst Nate. No, he needs to get a thank you as well, so, and a welcome. But no, I think it's been a good year. I think in terms of people coming to these meetings, we talk to tennis and to pickleball players, and they're so passionate, red-faced, angry, and we say, come speak. And I think we had maybe 1 or 2. I mean, we had people in the Zoom, and they're passionate and they spoke during the Zoom. But even if people feel strongly, it's hard to get input. So I think that's a great thing to look into. And I think that's all I have. So I will adjourn this meeting at 7:11 p.m. Okay, thank you.
I can tell you as chair, the last thing you want to do is see that a rope fell up with passionate